Hi everyone, my name is Melissa van Dijk, and in today's video I want to talk about the possible connection between salt intake, water retention and breakouts. And I want to be very clear from the beginning. This is just an observation I've made over time based on my own diet and how my skin reacted to certain patterns. Now, if you've watched my previous videos about how I cleared my acne through diet, you might remember that in my earlier diet, I was consuming quite a lot of cheese, like feta and other sheep or goat cheeses. And even though they were usually more traditionally made, so not so heavily processed, they're still relatively high in sodium. And I was eating them almost daily, sometimes around 20 to 50 grams, usually with my breakfast eggs or as a snack in between. So overall, my salt intake during that time was definitely on the higher side, even though I wasn't eating a lot of processed foods. Now, what's interesting is that in my current diet, my overall salt intake is actually much lower. And this wasn't something I did intentionally. It just kind of happened as I started eating more like the locals here. Now, I don't really add much salt to my meals anymore, and most of the foods I eat now are naturally quite low in sodium. But there's one exception, and that is fermented fish. And this is where it becomes quite interesting, because I've noticed that when I consume it more frequently, I'm more likely to experience breakouts, mostly on my shoulders and upper back. And when I reduce or remove it again, things tend to calm down fairly quickly. So naturally, that made me question whether there could be some kind of connection here. Because if you think back to the time when I had those stronger shoulder and back breakouts, I was eating quite a lot of foods like smoked salmon, mackerel, kimchi, sauerkraut, and also nuts, often in their processed versions. That was in the very beginning of my experiment, when I tried to eliminate gluten or bread from my diet and ended up replacing it with all kinds of foods that were suggested online. And looking back at it now, there really does seem to be a pattern with those types of foods. Now, I'm not saying that salt directly causes acne, but that a higher sodium intake might influence things in a more indirect way. For example, through water retention or how your body handles fluids and the internal balance. Because salt plays a big role in how the body regulates water, and changes in that balance could potentially affect your skin as well. And what makes it even more interesting is that many foods that are often considered healthy or beneficial are actually quite high in salt. For example, smoked or fermented fish, which are often promoted as very nutrient-dense, or things like a kimchi or sauerkraut, which are also fermented and can contain significant amounts of sodium depending on how they are made. And then on the other side, you have something like semi-aged or aged cheese, which in my case didn't seem to cause direct issues, even though the sodium content was relatively high. So it's not as simple as saying salt is the problem. It seems to be more about how your body responds to certain foods in certain amounts, and possibly even certain combinations we create when we kind of assemble these meals, almost like we are building them based on nutritional ideas rather than just eating simple foods. And that's really the point I want to make here, because when you're trying to understand what's causing your breakouts, it's very easy to focus only on the obvious things, or the things that are talked about the most. But sometimes it's these less obvious factors, like how much salt you're consuming on a daily basis, especially through specific foods or certain combinations, that might be worth paying more attention to. And this doesn't mean you need to eliminate all of these foods. It just means that if you notice patterns like this, it might be worth adjusting the frequency or the amount and seeing how your skin responds over time. Because in the end, it always comes back to the same thing: what you do consistently and how your body reacts to it. And that's something you can only really figure out by observing it closely over time. And that's what I want to share with you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!